welcome everybody. Delighted that you're with us today. And as Jeannie was saying, we're in Branson, Missouri getting some playtime with kids, which is pretty awesome. And Miss Jeannie, do we have anybody in the phone queue with a hand up or anything happening in the chat room?
It's all quiet. It's quiet on
Awesome.
your end there, too.
It is.
I don't know if you're talking or not, Michael, or if it's my phone, but I can't hear you.
Okay, I am here.
Okay,
Just,
I can hear you now.
Having a bit of a challenge with my phone.
Okay. So we have quite a few listeners today. Are you going back
Awesome.
to the book of Thomas?
I was going to go back to the book of Thomas, yes. And as we look into, I think we were up to, let me just get to my note here. I think we were up to saying 7 or so. Oh, 10. So when we completed our last conversation, we're working, if you're not familiar with one of the texts that was not canonized at the Council of Nicaea, so it did not get included in what are called the Scriptures, but it's a text that was found, I believe, with the Nag Hammadi scrolls, and it purports to be from Thomas. And rather than a narrative or a story about the life of Yeshua, it's just statements, just things that he said and instructions that he gave. And statement 10, there are 170, I believe, or 100, not sure. But number 10, if you want to catch what we did with it on Friday, we talked about, or pardon me, was it Friday or Thursday?
It was actually Wednesday.
Show.
It was Wednesday because we were driving on Thursday and then playing with Krista on Friday.
Right. Okay, cool. So Wednesday show, we started with this. So saying 10 from the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus said, I have cast a fire upon the world. And, you know, we default to the word Jesus, but in truth, that was not the man's name at all. That was actually a Greek idea of selling a rabbi to the Greco-Roman world, which, you know, was not necessarily an overly popular idea. So you'll remember that one of the Greek gods was Zeus, so Jesus, Hail Zeus, becomes something that's recognized there. But he says something curious here, because most people speak about Yeshua, or at least I speak a lot about Yeshua, and serenity and peace and forgiveness. But he says here, I have cast fire upon the world, and behold, I guard it until it is ablaze. And when you look at the fact that most people live literally in the world of perception, the world between their ears, and the world of perception for most people is based on a foundation where they are members of something other than what Yeshua is inviting people to do. Yeshua's invitation is to bring your mind back to a love-based device rather than the world's fear and hostility-based device. And perception being a product of what's going on in the human mind, you know, most people think they look through their eyes at what's going on out in the world, but you've never seen anything through your eyes, and you never will see anything through your eyes. The eye is a one-way valve. Information comes in, light energy, information carried on frequencies of light, and the brain takes that information and turns it into whatever is stored within the mind that relates to that particular information. If you want to get a really good piece of tutoring on that idea, I suggest that you do a search on YouTube for Anil, A-N-I-L, Seth, S-E-T-H. He's a neuroscientist, and he explained how the human mind is always making its best guess, always generating the world we see You know, if you've been working with the Course in Miracles over and over and over and over again talks about the world you see, the world you see, the world you see. It's not talking about the world you live in, unless you interpret the world you see as the world you live in. But the fact is, your physiology lives in an energy system that is not definable in terms of the visual images that our brain generates and shows us. So Anil Seth does a great job as a neuroscientist in explaining how the mind does this, and that the pictures that we think we see in our minds are not something we're looking at through our eyes, but rather they're, metaphorically, they're painted on the inside of our eyeballs. And that's the lowercase w world that most people live in. If you want to go still deeper into this, there's a great lesson in the Course in Miracles called What is the World? If you go to our YouTube channel, and to get there, you can go to our website, whyagain.org. Over on the right-hand side, you'll see all the social media links. Hit YouTube, and you'll be on our YouTube channel. Or you can just go to YouTube and type in Michael, M-I-C-H-A-E-L, R-Y-C-E, and you'll be on a YouTube channel, and look for a video, What is the World? And I think it is perhaps one of the most important lessons in A Course in Miracles, and probably one of the most misunderstood, because when the Course talks about this world, it's talking about the world of perception. In fact, the opening words of that lesson say, the title of the lesson, What is the World? It's just simple, straightforward, straight up, an answer that's so simple and so straightforward that most people miss it. It says the world is false perception. If you live in the images generated by your brain, now some of those images might be useful. Some of those images might actually be accurate about what's going on out there in the world. But if you misperceive and you think that what your brain is showing you is actually what's happening out there, then you live in the world of false perception. And the Course goes on in that particular lesson to say, it is born of error. The world of false perception, the world most people live in, is born of error. And it never leaves its source, i.e., whatever it is that we're experiencing inside of us, we're experiencing inside of us because it's there. We can't experience something outside of us in terms of the sensation in our physiology. We're always experiencing the sensations of what's moving inside of us. Though most people, being born and raised in the one world universal religion of blame, have a language that is always about how somebody else is responsible for what's moving in them in the world that they experience, in the world of false perception. And that lesson goes on further to say the world was made as an attack on the Creator. It's a world made up by us to keep us from what the actuality is, from what the Creator gave us in creation. And the whole process of forgiveness is about, in the context of this particular statement, about burning down that world. Again, he says, I've cast a fire upon the world. And I'm here to guard. I'm here to support. And many people will read those texts, but not really pick up the tools or do the work. And so they'll live in that world of false perception and believe everything that it tells them. The marker that tells you that the world of false perception is in total error is that accompanying its constructs, there is some form of hostility or fear. If hostility or fear is active, then the world you're looking at between your ears, the world generated by the brain, the world of perception, is based in corrupt data. Most people live in that world their whole lives and refuse. And, so here I hear Yeshua saying, behold, I guard it until it is a place. When you actually hear that as it was intended, then if you were brought up as most of us were in this Western culture, in that one world universal religion of blame, then their world's going to have to catch fire. It's going to burn down, and it's going to be a tough challenge to let go of it. And Yeshua says, I'm here as support. And then he goes on to say in statement 11, this heaven shall pass away, and that which is above it shall pass away, and they that are dead are not alive, and they that are alive shall not die. And my offering would be that the definition he's offering here of life, you remember there's a particular passage where this young man, he's starting to be set ablaze, his perception, and he says to Yeshua, well, I'm going to follow you up. Man, I'm with you. But first I have to go bury my parents. Now, that didn't mean that his parents had just died and he was going to do an actual funeral. In that culture, it was the young man, the firstborn son's job to take care of their parents until the parents died, and then they would bury them. And you remember this young man says, so I have to go do that first. And Yeshua says, let the dead bury the dead. He's saying, if you're not living as a created human being as love, then in no way, shape, or form are you alive. And what you think everything that's wonderful is about isn't true. So if the source of your perception, the source of your world, rather than being from your human beingness from love, then dead to the actuality of the Creator's world, the actuality of the world of love. And most everybody's interpreting the world of the Creator through a dead perceptual mind. So he's saying if you're stuck in that, you're already dead. Same as he said to that young man, let the dead bury the dead, let the blind lead the blind. If you're going to actually do my work, your world is going to go become ablaze. You're going to burn it down. And it's going to be replaced with something much more powerful. And if you are alive, then if you are in fact in the world of actuality that I'm describing to you, then you are eternal. In the days, he says, when you were eating that which was dead, you were making it alive. In other words, if you took something dead and you took it into your field, you actually gave it life. It actually went through a transformation. When you come to the light, what will you do? On the day when you were one, you became two. But when you have become two, what will you do? In other words, if you separate from yourself, there's the true state of being, the one that Yeshua says is the opposite of the one that needs to die. Remember, he talks about, in order for you to live, you've got to die. Most people have gotten lost in this duality. Their human beingness as created love is not the state they live in. They live in a picture in their minds, messages from their culture, power person dynamics that run their lives. So the disciples in statement 12 ask a question. We know that thou wilt go from us. Who is he who shall be great over us? In other words, who's going to lead us? And Yeshua said, in the place to which you come, you shall go to James the just, for whose sake heaven and earth came into being. And James the just was his brother. It's interesting that this book kind of conflicts, and I think that may be one of the reasons why it was discarded, with those who wanted to put Peter on the throne. It's not much different than the political games today. Everybody wanted their candidate. Yeshua said his brother James was the one that you want to follow. That's whose leadership you want to go to. Then he says to the disciples in statement 13, make a comparison to me and tell me who I'm like. Peter said to him, thou art like a righteous angel. Matthew said, thou art like a wise man of understanding. Thomas said, Master, my mouth will no wise suffer that I say whom thou art like. So he's saying to Yeshua, man, you are so far beyond. I can't even put talking about into words. And then Yeshua says to him, I'm not the master. That's not what I'm here for. But because you've drunk from what I've handed you, from what I've given you, you've become drunk from the bubbling spring that I've measured out. What's he talking about? That I've measured out. He's opened a space where rather than people experiencing themselves through their perceptual minds, through the game of hostility, fear, blame, drama, and trauma, which, you take a look at that world at that time, and it's not much different today, that's pretty much what ran the world. And so Yeshua says, I've been tapping you and I've been supporting you in touching into the world where you function as a human being, and now your mind, your ego mind, that self I said has to die, wants me to be your master. You want me to run your life for you. It's like, no, I didn't come for that. I'm aimed at you directly. So you become drunk on what I've been sharing with you, and you can't continue to get it from me. Yes, I'm here to guide you. So he took Thomas aside, and he spoke 3 words. Now, when Thomas came to his companions, they asked him, what did he say to you? Thomas said to them, if I tell you one of the words which he said to me, you will take up stones and throw them at me, and a fire will come out of the stones and burn you up. In other words, he's offering the straight goods. You remember the passage, and we talked about parables just before we started all of this, that to the average person, the scriptures are very clear. Without a parable, he spoke not to them. And in Aramaic, parable is parallel meaning. And then he spoke of a teaching that he offered directly to the disciples who were more advanced in building the brain cells and had the brain cells to hear him. And so Thomas, understanding that, let's see, how do I say this? The disciples have Yeshua in their perceptual minds, and he's categorized. You're this, you're the master, you're the wise man. Yeshua has, or pardon me, Thomas, I would offer, has bypassed that state. And instead of categorizing him through perception and putting him in a box, what he's doing is he's saying, I can't put you in a category. What I'm experiencing is so magnificent that there are no words for it. And, you'll remember that Yeshua said, there's so many things I want to say to you, but you can't hear them yet. Thomas was ready to hear them. The disciples were not. And it would so challenge their perceptual construct, Thomas says, if I spoke the words to you, just one of them, you'd stone me, because it's going to so set your perceptual world, the world between your ears, on fire. So again, listen to Thomas's words. He's collapsed his perception. And he's like, my mouth will no wise suffer that I say whom thou art, or who you're like. It's like, there are no words for this. It's a wordless state. So Thomas receives what he says and then tells the other guys, I can't say it. There's no way to put it into words. You don't have the eyes to hear as yet. And if I did, you'd start stoning me and the stones would burn you. Your worldview, your perceptual constructs would so begin to fall apart that you'd be risked with destruction. If you think of it in terms of energy, if someone's living in the world of perception on a scale of, let's say, 1 to 100, their highest, most wonderful, most generous, most amazing moment might be a level 7 on a scale of 1 to 100. If you were to take them to a level 100 experience, the mountaintop experience, most people would crash and burn. they would not be able to reconstitute, lived in, they'd not be able to bring the two worlds together. It's a gradual state, this movement. And then in statement 14, he says, they've asked him about fasting. What should we eat? He says, if you fast, you will beget a sin for yourselves. And if you pray, you will be condemned. They said, how do we pray? And if you give alms, you will do evil to your spirits. And if you go into any land and travel in its regions, if they receive you, eat what they set before you. In other words, if you try to follow a rigid set of rules in your mind, you're going to be in trouble. So if you go into another land, travel in another region, and you're received, then receive, eat what they set before you. Heal the sick. Be that space of active love and bring healing, for that which goes into your mouth will not defile you, but that which comes forth from your mouth, that is what will defile you. And where do most people live? Their whole language base is out of the one world universal religion of blame. Anything that's going on within them that has some sort of trauma or pain attached, they've always got a story for it and how it's somebody else's fault. There's a conflict and they walk away from the conflict and their whole conversation in their heads is about that other person and what they did to them. And so if blame comes forward, if you're in that state, then it is the energy of your own blame that's going to destroy you. But if you dissolve that world, if you are relieved of that world, and when there's a conflict, your focus is on, what do I need to do? What's my work here? If I raise a hand in violence because I've got somebody to blame for what's happening in my life, then I have to inquire of what's going on inside of me. And in inquiring on what's going on inside of me, I have to work through whatever that's about. So be careful, not as much what goes into your mouth, but that which comes out of your mouth. That will defile you. And then in saying 15, he says, when you see him who was not born of woman, throw yourselves down on your face and worship him. He is your Father. In other words, when you stop seeing through carbon-based memory, when you stop seeing through the physical world and start to see with another set of eyes, and one is not sourced from the past, one's reality structure is sourced from a mind connected to love and connected in the present, not sourced from Adamos, red clay, the body, sourced from woman, then you're in touch with someone who can support you coming back to the full connection to source. And then in statement 16, he says, perhaps men think that I am come to cast peace upon the world, and know not that I am come to cast divisions upon the earth, fire, sword, and war. And then he's defining how everybody lives in their own perceptual world, and therefore they are divided by that. And when he says cast fire, he's not here to start wars, but he recognizes that when people start to work through the divisions in themselves, when they start to work through the hostilities, the fears, and the blames, then there's going to be conflict. He goes on to say, for there shall be 5 in a house, and there shall be 3 against 2, and 2 against 3, and the father against the son, and the son against the father. And they stand as solitaires. In other words, their perceptual constructs are so separated that they can never make peace among themselves. There's always that separation over, I have a different reality than you. And until an individual, a couple, a family, individuals do their work and can stand with each other, if one of those issues comes up, there's going to be that kind of separation. Then in saying 17, he says, I will give you that which eye has not seen and ear has not heard and hand has not touched, and which is not entered into the heart of man. In other words, I'm going to move you beyond your carbon-based memory system. Remember, we talked about how the mind of man, perception, there's that passage where Yeshua comes out of the Garden of Gethsemane, Peter's whacked at the high priest servant's head, knocked his ear off, taken his ear off. Remember, Yeshua called that man, Peter, Satan? And it's interesting, I was talking to someone recently who was very fundamental in their view, and the words are so plain and simple, it is pretty accurately translated, but he just could not fathom. No, he wasn't talking about Peter as Satan. He was saying that Satan was in Peter, and he was talking to Satan, not Peter. It's like, no, read it clearly. He's defining exactly what he means by Satan. And he calls Peter Satan. He says, for you think in the mind of man, rather than the plan of God. In other words, you're not attuned to the actuality that I'm bringing to you. So here you are. I've got a plan, and I'm going to heal this high priest servant. I'm going to actually function as a human being. And yeah, he's going to slaughter me, but that's okay, because I'm not lost in his world. You are. You are trapped in Satan. You think in the mind of man, and you can't tap into this higher energy that's what I'm cooperating with. And so he dresses Peter down, moves him out of the way, says, get behind me, get out of the way. You're stuck in carbon-based memory. And then he reaches forward and he heals the high priest servant, the man who's going to have him mercilessly slaughtered. And over the years, I've had many, many people say, well, Michael, that was pretty insane, because look at that, it got him killed. Like, well, I noticed it did get him killed. Did you notice they couldn't keep him dead? This is what he's talking about. Can't be killed if you're living in the world of being. You can only be killed if you are locked in physiology and its perceptions, and you hold that death occurs. And of course, it's a pretty big, pretty big construct in the world. And everybody says how foolish it is to even think of changing that. But go back to those earlier statements. What did Yeshua say? You're not going to die. If you are attached to that idea of self in your mind that you call by your name, and that idea of self that you call by your name is a product of what's going on in your carbon-based memory, and you talk about how old you are and when you expect to die, then physiology is going to die, and your awareness, your being, will lose awareness with you. And what Yeshua is saying is, if you're not lost in that game, even if your physiology dies, what the world calls dies, you will live. And he, after his physiology was pretty clearly beaten to a pulp and killed, he brought it back into expression. He brought it back. Is that what he was talking about? I mean, there's a big challenge. And remember, he said, the things I do, you can do. And this isn't theology. This isn't about church or churchianity. This is about where we live as human beings. He's inviting people to function as human beings, to function as love. I had an interaction with someone on Facebook recently who was just railing on the evils of the world and the evils in every politician, the evils in every movement and everything. And I just kind of gently put forward the suggestion that he might want to recognize that that's a construct of his mind, and he might want to do some inner work to dissolve that. And he, as opposed to hearing an invitation, he had this whole list of accusations of what I had done to him. That's what was called forward from his carbon-based memory. And if that's what's called forward, things were refused to heal in ourselves, and those things involve death, then with them we die. But that's not a requirement. So I'm here to give you something that your eye, your perceptual mind will never see. Your perception through your ears, your hearing will never hear. Your hand will never touch. And I'm here that, here we've got millions of people who are totally committed to this death cult. And it's fear and it's hostility. And if the foundation, if the root of our generational patterns is this hostility, this fear, this defensiveness, this attack, this puking on oneself or the people around them, then there's no room in their heart, and in the Aramaic language, that word heart, properly translated, would be the unconscious. There's no room in their unconscious for this bigger understanding. And it is a gradual process. As he said earlier, there's this process you're going to go through. You're going to move from being a member of the death cult to where you start to suspect that, gee, maybe I'm something other than a body. And then move into still a different state. So the one of the objectives of the forgiveness work, the going into carbon-based memory and deleting, transmuting, transforming everything based in hostility or fear, is to make room in your heart, in your unconscious, for the truth of your eternal created essence, which is love. And Miss Jeannie, it's almost 12:35 or 1:35, and so I have this inclination to just check and see. This has covered a lot of material, and see if we've got anybody in the phone queue with a hand up or anything happening in the chat room.
It is all quiet. We've got a lot of listeners today, but there are no hands up.
Well, if you're on one of those stations where you can't see us, our call-in number is 563-999-3581. Right, where we can't see you, pardon me. Then if you call that number, 563-999-3581, you'll be listening directly to the show on your phone. And then if you push 1, that'll raise a hand in the control panel. And Gene will know you have a thought or a question for us. So if you have a thought or a question, push 1. Let's have a conversation about it. And if there are no hands, then we'll continue with saying 18. So the disciples, they're still, they're stuck in this death game, this death cult called carbon-based memory, and the belief that they are physical beings. There's no room in their minds for anything else, and so they ask them a question. Statement 18 from the book of Thomas, they say, "Tell us, Yeshua, how will our end be?" So they're reflecting how committed to death they are. They want to know how it's going to end. And Yeshua says, "Have you then discovered the beginning, that you seek after the end? For where the beginning is, there shall be the end. Blessed is he." Now, I'm not sure in Aramaic what the word here that's translated as blessed is he, whether that's tuvehun, the same as in the Beatitudes. But if it is, he's giving another key to how to access the native guidance system that was put into you from the beginning to guide you to your highest state. So in the Beatitudes, where we're told each one of them, it says, "Blessed are they, blessed are they, blessed are they, blessed are they." Tuvehun is the word, and the word is a 3-part word that actually means a latent neural structure, yes, a mind structure, implanted by the Creator to guide you to happiness and well-being becomes your conscious possession. So in each of those Beatitudes, Yeshua was saying, here's the tool, here's the how-to. It's not, Beatitudes aren't a nice philosophy saying, here's how to access what I'm trying to teach you to access. And when you connect to that, then your real human life begins. You will function as this alive presence of love rather than out of an old hostility, fear, carbon-based familial system. So I'm not sure, I don't have it on translation, but I'm going to kind of assume and read that word blessed as in the Beatitudes. And so a latent neurostructure implanted by the Creator to guide you to happiness and well-being comes as a guidance system for you. You who shall stand in the beginning, and he shall know the end, and shall not taste of death. What in essence he's saying to them is, to your carbon-based memory that believes in a physical life and blame and hostility and fear, to all of that, this is a mystery. This is a mystery teaching. This is what people talk about as mysteries. If you've got the brain cells for it, it's not so mysterious. He's saying if you finally are reborn, and we're not talking about, as that conversation went in the scriptures about getting back into your mother's womb, but give up your attachment to carbon-based memory, to the perceptual mind, the mind of man, the resistor, the one who misleads, then you will taste the beginning, the actual true beginning of your human life as love functioning through a human form. And then you will know what this word end means, and it's got nothing to do with dying. So he goes on to say, when you achieve that, you will not taste of death. Not going to happen. You are not destined for that. Yes, the world mind, and everybody's doing it. Aging, dying. Remember, we've quoted from the DeCourcy Clinic in Cincinnati medical conference I was at, I don't even know, 35, 40 years ago. Burned into my brain the words that they said after doing medical research on death and time. And they said, time is not toxic. Time has no effect on human tissue under any conditions. It is the belief in the effect of time by those who subscribe to such a belief that acts as a poison. All death is suicide. We do it to ourselves. And the way we do it is we engage in energetic dynamics that are incoherent with what this human form was designed for. The only coherent energy for this human form is that of the presence of love. Notice, if you live in the mind of man, when something less than the presence of love comes up in you, what do? You go into some form of hostility or fear, corrupt data, and you've got somebody to blame for it. And sometimes the blame will be on yourself. In Aramaic, it's interesting, you are your own neighbor. So when you recognize that your true origin, your true being, again, this is statement 18, touch into the point, and this will not come through your senses. It will not come through your mind. You will hear it in words, but words will not give you the experience. Words can give you the tools with which you will have the experience, but you're never going to hear it from anybody's lips. You will hear a description of the tools if you apply them. Well, what do you mean by that, Michael? Well, okay, let's take rule number 1. Be 1,000% responsible for whether or not you're functioning out of love. And if something moves in you that's unlike love, then step back, take a breath, step back to love, and dissolve that which is based in hostility or fear. That's called overcoming the mind of man. And that's the only thing that kills us. Death has become a tradition among men. And it's a hard tradition to give up when everywhere you look, your eyes witness it. And it is only doing the internal work that will change that dynamic. So if you stand in the beginning, then you will know the end, and death isn't one of the options. Saying 19, blessed is he who was before he came into being. If you become my disciples and hear my words, these stories will minister unto you. For you have 5 trees in paradise, which do not move in summer or winter, and their leaves do not fall. He who knows them shall not taste of death. Got a lot of commitment, a lot of promise here about putting an end to death. Now, how accurate do you suppose all of the disciples' teachings were about what Yeshua was putting forward when you look at the fact that they all died? Did they ever reach the level where they have the eyes to see and the ears to hear? That they could teach you the core of what he was teaching? It is a process, and each person must engage the process themselves. So even if you're lost in the past and you actually, and he uses the word disciple. I remember the word disciple comes from the word discipline comes from the word disciple. You have to enter into the discipline that he's offering. It's not some big pile of BS, some big belief system. It's a set of tools. And he says, even the very stones will minister to you. And everything, when he speaks of the trees, everything will become a part of your life energy, and you will realize it is all a part of your expression, and you are in no way separate from it. It is only the separated self that is a product of carbon-based memory that thinks it's separated. Saying number 20. And the disciples asked him, tell us what the kingdom of heaven is like. And he said to them, it's like the grain of a mustard seed, smaller than all seeds, but when it falls on the earth, which is tilled. And in essence, what he's saying is, the tools I've given you are how you till your own carbon-based memory, your own mind, your own so-called body. And here's the seed. When it falls on the earth which is tilled, in other words, if you've done the work, then you are the fertile ground. And this seed puts forth a great branch and becomes shelter for the very birds of heaven. So the nurturing, the use of the tools is kind of like preparing the soil and standing in a state of being able, rather than I've got to go, do, instead of a human being, we become human doings. When I will take the time to be with myself and to deal with what's going on inside of me, rather than, I got to get up and go because something in here is chasing me. When he talks about the earth being tilled, he's saying you've got to till your mind. And then Mary says to Yeshua, whom are thy disciples like? And, he's describing the group that's been following him, you remember there's one point where there was a whole group of disciples, and when he told them what they had to do, they all complained and whined and said, too hard a saying, and they left. Who was left? He describes them. He says they're like little children dwelling in a field which is not theirs. When the owners of the field come, they will say, yield up to us our field. They are naked before them, to yield it up to them and to give them back their field. Therefore, I say, if the master of the house knows that the thief is coming, he will keep watch before he comes, and will not let him dig into his house of his kingdom and carry off his vessels. Then, be watchful over and against the world. Gird up your loins with great strength, that the brigands may not find a way to come at you, since the advantage for which you look, they will find. In other words, as you sow, you reap. Whatever it is that is your issue, somebody's going to tap into it and bring it up for you. If you haven't noticed, the purpose of the world is to kick you right square in the limitation. If you have a limitation, notice that time after time after time, you will find a set of circumstances. There'll be a person, there'll be a situation, there'll be a business, there'll be something that will show you that part of your mind. If you walk away from that situation talking about how terrible they were and look what they did, and don't deal with the part of you that's in blame, then you've lost another opportunity. So he's saying the brigands will find a way. The world is relentless. It will always show you. You can't. Now, when he said, nothing will remain hidden. Everything you hold is going to show up in your world. So become strong, that the brigands, that is, those out there who are attuned to what you don't want to deal with, may not find a way to come at you, since the advantage for which you look, they will find. In other words, if you're in dishonesty somewhere and you're trying to get something, then something or someone in the world is going to tap into that very something and bring it up. And he goes on to say, may there be among you a man of understanding, a woman of understanding. When the fruit tree was ripe, he came quickly. His sickle is in his hand, and he reaped it. He that has ears to hear, let him hear. In other words, at the very moment that your deepest hostility or fear, the brigands have shown you your deepest hostility or fear, when you stop talking about the brigand, when you stop talking about the world, when you stop talking about whose fault it is, and of course, what does the non-being mind do? The fault is always out there. Walk away from that situation, talking to yourself about yourself, rather than talking to yourself about what they did to you. The fact that they did it to you is perfect. Guess what? Someone can only come and do it to you if it is appointed to be done by you. If you hold the energy of it, then moving through the world, someone's going to tap into that energy and bring it up. When they do, if you walk away from that situation with a conversation about your work, what is it that I need to do? Why do I have this rage, this guilt, this grief, this fear, this trauma, this poverty, this hatred, this vengeance, this lack of willingness to be caring and loving in relationship? Why do I have any of that? Because it's in you. Have a conversation with yourself about it and do the work that it's going to take to change it, and everything will be transformed. And at that moment, he speaks of that then as ripe fruit. And that's the moment to pick up the sickle. That's the moment to pick up the worksheet and do the work that you need to do to clean up that part of your mind. And so he's saying, he that has ears to hear, let him hear. If you got the brain cells, then you're going to go, oh, okay, I got it. I'll do the work. And then in saying 22, as Yeshua saw some infants at the breast, he said to his disciples, these little ones at the breast are like those who enter the kingdom. They said to him, if we then be like children, shall we enter the kingdom? And he said, when you make the two one, and when you make the inside as the outside, and the outside as the inside, and the upper side is the lower, and when you make the male and the female into a single one, that the male may not be male and the female female, when you make eyes in the place of an eye, and hand in the place of a hand, and a foot in the place of a foot, an image in the place of an image, then you shall enter into the kingdom. In other words, when you clean up your perceptual mind, and what is, you see it as it is, rather than perceiving someone out of your own unresolved energetic dynamics and blaming them for what you're feeling, because you're feeling what your energetic dynamics have moving in them, but you're making pictures of somebody else out of it. But when you get down to the point where an eye appears before you, and that's all you see is an eye, a foot appears before you, and all you see is a foot, you see actuality as it is, then you're entering into what he referred to as the community of love. The Greeks translated as the kingdom of heaven. And we've got about 5 minutes, so I'm just going to check with you, Jeannie, and see if we happen to have anybody with a hand up.
No, it is all quiet. So if somebody has a question, press
quiet.
one really quick.
We got 5 minutes if you have a question. If any of this thing is making sense here or not making sense, or there's a question about it, please feel free to put your hand up.
We actually have 4 minutes. So come on, press
4 minutes.
I guess they're going to stay
Okay,
quiet.
well, let's move to 23. So statement 23 out of the book of Thomas, Yeshua says, I shall choose you 1 out of 1,000 and 2 of 10,000, and they shall stand as a single one. He's back to recognize that this whole idea of separation is false. We are all connected. Our perception shows us there's somebody over there, and here I am over here. But if I could raise the vibratory rate at which my eye takes in information, then what my brain would be able to construct would be a picture based on a connected whole. Interesting, you'll remember we've talked about physicists coined the term sustained incoherence. David Bohm. And David Bohm talked about, as a physicist, he talked about a world of unbroken wholeness. Kind of hard to get speech that doesn't belie the whole regulatory speech principle when you're trying to use speech to describe the actuality, when its nature is so deeply out of phase with the truth. So Bohm talks about unbroken wholeness, and that's what I hear Yeshua talking about here, that you will see that it is all one. So I shall choose you 1 of 1,000 and 2 out of 10,000, and they shall stand as a single one. And in order to achieve that state, we're going to have to get rid of what David Bohm called sustained incoherence and engage only in energies that are coherent for a human form designed to be governed by the active presence of love, and that only. And that's the big challenge. is to move out of that state of separation and back to that state of connected oneness. And so he's saying that 1,000, 10,000 will stand as one, where we'll recognize. It's kind of like if you imagine an ant looking at let's say a beautiful mandala. What can the ant make out of this beautiful mandala? Nothing. There's no capacity to conceive of what this beautiful, colorful interaction of art is for the ant. And if we live in this perceptual mind that's based in separation, hostility, and fear, it's like impossible to conceive of what is the wholeness, what is the state of full being for all of us going to look like. And are you willing to give up the world of separation in order to move in the direction of that state of wholeness, which my offering is what we're designed for? And so tomorrow we'll pick up with the idea of the state of wholeness, and we'll move forward with the next step, saying 24 from the Gospel of Thomas. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Have the best year yet of your eternal life. It's an awesome gift to give the world. Blessings.